Hey, everybody. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Monday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky, another blockbuster in the NBA. Kevin Durant is on is leaving Phoenix. How does that impact the Lakers? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one's always free and never behind paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can hang out with over 35,000 subscribers to the channel, Andy, all of whom are wondering how exactly the blockbuster deal, the second of the summer that sends Kevin Durant from Phoenix to Houston, impacts the Lakers. We will break that down. We will also talk about the NBA Finals. We have a champion, the Oklahoma City Thunder. Some horrible stuff happening with Tyrese Haliburton and his Achilles, but a series that presents a lot of lessons, not just to the Lakers, but the entire NBA. So we'll get to that before it's all said and done. I want to let everybody know that today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That was probably not the news the NBA wanted. The trade of Kevin Durant happening the morning, really, of Game 7, but alas, here we are. He leaves Phoenix. He's going to Houston. Not a terribly surprising destination for Kevin Durant, Andy, but one that has a ton of impact up and down the Western Conference.
Well, to begin, the league had already had the finals completely overshadowed by the Lakers getting sold, which is one of the biggest stories in NBA history, much less this offseason. So at that point, you might as well go whole hog, whole ham, and just have Kevin Durant get traded on the day of Game 7 because you've already gone this far. It's also a lesson, too, that the draft is coming up on Wednesday, and I imagine a big impetus for Phoenix was wanting to get this deal done before the draft. So if you don't want these type of transactions potentially happening right before or during your finals, you might want to consider moving the draft back, moving back some of this other stuff so teams actually legitimately have time to space out some of these things. Because in fairness to the Suns, like, bro, we're on a clock, man.
Yeah,
we got to do this.
And there's no, once you have a deal in place, you've got to do it. You can't do this. Okay, well, I'll just quietly wait until Monday before we announce something.
Yeah, it's not official.
Can't overshadow everything.
Right. It's to be clear, it's not, and this matters, it's not official until July 6th. And if for no other reason, that's important because I would not be surprised in the slightest if this deal expands to, third team, maybe even a fourth team, because as we will get into, Phoenix's roster is a big old cluster of what the F right now. Like, it makes no sense at all. So probably some things the Suns would like to work out. But yeah, these are some of the byproducts of having everything so bunched up.
So the deal is, at least as it stands now, is Kevin Durant going to Houston in exchange for Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, the 10th pick in the draft, the upcoming draft, and then 5 second-round picks. So the general consensus seems to be, and we'll get to the Phoenix end of this in a second, that the Suns didn't do as well as perhaps you would hope in trying to trade Kevin Durant. Although I think it reflects certain realities of the market that are very relevant to the Lakers. But from Houston's perspective, they pick up KD in exchange for a problematic, we'll call it, young star, in the sense that he had a terrible first round of the playoffs, not a terribly efficient shooter, a guy who's kind of a tweener, I think, in a lot of people's minds between clearly doesn't suck. I mean, Jalen Green is not a bad player, but also not quite the guy you want to be making the centerpiece of your offensive attack. They trade him, they trade Dylan Brooks, and they keep everybody else, Jabari Smith, Sengun, Eason,
Thompson,
Sheppard,
even Cam Whitmore,
even Cam Whitmore, right? Just and all of the most prime picks that they had available, including, by the way, half of Phoenix's draft capital that Houston actually owns. They didn't, and so they didn't give any of that up. And Houston now essentially replaces the inefficiency of Jalen Green with the still remarkable efficiency of Kevin Durant, who will be 37 when the season starts, Andy, but is coming off an excellent, particularly offensive season. The Suns were terrible last year. Kevin Durant was not.
The Rockets did as well in this trade, I think, as they could possibly have imagined. Yes, they gave up a top 10 pick, but they have so many young players and they have other draft capital that at the end of the day, they can afford to do that. I do think there will be times where they miss Dylan Brooks's defense and, the edge and the mentality that I think he did help create in that locker room. And on his best nights, he can be a very good 3-and-D player, but he's not who you're going to hold up this trade over, especially when you take into account everybody that they kept. They got off Jalen Green's money, which is very important. He's owed about 103 or 105 mil over
about 35 mil a year for the next 3 years.
Right. They got off that. That in and of itself, let's say Kevin Durant didn't sign an extension, which I think is improbable, but let's just say for the sake of argument, it happened. They still win this trade because they got off Green's money and it's going to give them more flexibility and more resources to make sure you lock up guys like Jabari Smith Jr. and Tari Eason, who I believe are both extension eligible this offseason. Thompson's going to be coming up soon. Before you realize it, Reed Sheppard's going to be up. So, and they love Reed Sheppard, and Brooks being traded opens up time on the floor for him. That.
They're actually further away from the second apron after this deal than they were before it.
That in and of itself makes this a win. But then if you take a look at the defensive structure that the Rockets are going to have around Kevin Durant, who provides the efficiency and the ability to get a basket in crunch time when things break down, which was the one thing the Rockets really lacked for this team that is clearly moving in the right direction and can be an absolutely suffocating defense, very switchable defense, very disruptive. But Sengun is a talented scorer. Green at his best can be. Thompson is moving in that direction, but none of those guys are reliable in crunch time. KD is.
Yep.
This is we may talk about this. I think this is a very pivotal and important trade for Kevin Durant in terms of the way you look at his career.
Right. I mean, the legacy, right. The legacies for KD and the implications for
but that's
KD,
different than Houston.
Right. That does, it's irrelevant, in terms of
they did really well in this trade, and a West that was already a bleep just got bleepier.
Right. And that's the starting place for, I think, for the most immediate impact of this trade for the Lakers is that you take, it's not the only impact, but the most immediate impact for the Lakers is you take a team in the Rockets who were everybody forgets the Rockets were a 2 seed last year. They were outstanding. What they were, though, was a really bad offensive team, particularly in the playoffs. They were too easy to figure out. And a lot of that had to do with Jalen Green. You now take that team and turn a 2 seed that was, in the context of a playoff series, shaky, and now turn them into a legitimate contender in the Western Conference. And so Oklahoma City, they win a title on Sunday night. They will be favored to win another title next season.
Well they should be.
As well they should. But as we saw throughout the year, stuff happens. Things change. And Houston will be right there. So more on the fallout of the KD trade, what it means for the Western Conference, how this translates for the Lakers. We'll do all that next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Olipop. It's a new kind of soda made for people who love the classic taste of soda, but they want something that actually supports your health. And with just 2 to 5 grams of sugar, 9 grams of prebiotic fiber in every can, Olipop is reimagining soda in a way that is better for your gut. Traditional sodas, they're basically all sugar, like 39 grams in a regular Coke, 44 grams of sugar in an orange Fanta. Like, I honestly did not think that was possible or like legal. But Olipop flips the script with just a fraction of the sugar, no artificial sweeteners, gut-friendly ingredients like OliSmart, a blend that supports digestive and overall health. It's soda that tastes like the real thing, but does something good for your body. This one I love. It's the classic grape. It tastes just like grape juice that you loved as a kid. Like, really, I think that is clearly the taste they're looking to replicate, except some fizz added. And unlike that grape juice, it's actually helping your gut. It's not overloaded with sugar. And that's honestly a really big deal for me because I don't really like soda that much other than like club soda. I don't like sweet drinks. And I was honestly skeptical that I would like Olipop at all. And then I tasted it and not skeptical anymore. So get yourself a free can of Olipop. Just buy any 2 cans in a store and they'll reimburse you for one. Head to drinkolipop.com/lockedonnba to claim your free can and find an Olipop near you. That's drinkolipop.com/lockedonnba.
So obviously now you look at Houston and they are much more a legitimate playoff threat with Kevin Durant than they were with Jalen Green. So many, Alperin Segun should be a better player with Kevin Durant as the sort of heart of that offense, as opposed to Jalen Green. So Durant's presence is going to make Sengun better. Amen Thompson is ascending, and Sheppard, they believe, is ascending, and Tari Eason is a really good player, and so on and so on and so on. They are going to be outstanding and have the capacity to keep getting better because they save most of their capacity to do so. Team like Memphis was a high seed. They trade Desmond Bane. They're not folding the tents up. They still should be a pretty competitive squad. It's not going to get any easier when you factor in teams like San Antonio and all these other things. So obviously the pressure is going to be on the Lakers, and the team that teams like the Lakers competing, and the team that is giving up Durant here was already out of the playoffs last year. So it's not like Phoenix, Houston is ascending, but Phoenix, they went from a 4 seed to now they're going to be out of the playoffs. Well, they already were out of the playoffs last year. They didn't get any better in this deal. And it's not one of these addition by subtraction things. They're just going to be subtracting. The conference is really brutal. Small piece of possible shakeout here that might impact the free agent market, Andy. Among the players that might need to go for Houston, kind of balance their books and all that stuff, balance out their roster, they have an option on center Jock Londale that they might not pick up now. Is he a great player? He is not. Could he be available for a minimum? He certainly could be. Would he be
certainly not for more?
No, but like, he's not terrible. He's not a terrible player either. And any player that adds to rather than subtracts from the available pool of centers helps the Lakers because they need at least 2. And it is better to have more of those guys on the market than fewer. So that could impact things a little bit there. But the other thing that stuck out to me, for anybody who looks at this, I see a lot of parallels with just how a market works. Like, is Kevin Durant still really awesome? He sure is. But Phoenix didn't recoup Kevin Durant value, and I'm using air quotes for people listening on, listening in audio, not seeing the YouTube, because of context. And context would apply if the Lakers tried to trade LeBron for some reason. I mean, that became something that became possible.
They can't, because we get that a lot. People saying the Lakers should just trade LeBron. They can't trade LeBron unless LeBron wants to be.
Right, but let's say LeBron said sure.
Sure, people should know that because we get that comment at least 30 times per show. You cannot trade LeBron unless LeBron wants to be traded because he has a no trade clause.
And even if his no trade clause disappeared in his next contract, context would make it very hard to get a large return for LeBron for the same reasons that Kevin Durant, still an all-NBA caliber player, didn't get near what Phoenix paid to get him out of Brooklyn. Or, there is context with an Austin Reeves potential trade or anybody that you can't put Desmond Bane and Kevin Durant side by side to each other and be like, Bane got this, and why didn't Durant get 5 picks or something like that? Because Kevin Durant, certainly at least offensively, is still a better player than Desmond Bane. So context rules everything in the NBA, and the Lakers, in terms of the context of their trade pieces, are not dealing from a position of strength.
Just as a refresher, the Suns over 2-ish years traded Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, 4 firsts for Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, 1 first, 5 second-round picks. That is essentially the Kevin Durant experience for Phoenix. And by the way, it should be noted, this was during the period where new owner / loon Matt Ishbia was supposedly being a hands-off owner, letting the eggheads in the front office handle things, the supposed experts, but now he has no choice but to get involved. Good luck, Suns fans. Enjoy that experience.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the Suns didn't do great here. I had a long tech conversation with one of sort of our basketball friends, a guy I played fantasy basketball with, and this most absurdly competitive fantasy basketball league you will ever find, and all these other things. And he was sort of railing on how poorly the Suns did for KD. And yeah, it ain't great. I don't know who they asked for. I don't know who they value. I don't know any of that stuff. But they didn't get back any of the great things that you would think that you would be able to get in a trade for Kevin Durant. They did not get any of that stuff back from Houston. Even a guy like Cam Whitmore, who isn't really in their rotation even, but still is pretty well regarded as a young prospect. Even he's staying in Houston. They didn't get any of this stuff. But the flip side is Durant essentially cut off his own market because he made it clear, for example, a team like Minnesota, he's great friends with Anthony Edwards. They're super tight. He wasn't going to sign an extension there. So Minnesota, reportedly, I was reading Mark Stein stuff, and a few other people were saying Minnesota has been out for a while. Miami, and this, I think, is something that is highly relevant when you think about both this trade and lessons from the finals. Miami, fairly lowballed, to say the least, in terms of what they were willing to give the Rockets. Basically saying, look, we don't think, I think this is the logic, we do not think we are a Kevin Durant away from being able to win the Eastern Conference. And so we're not going to kind of give away.
Nor are they.
They're not. They're not. And that is the correct assessment.
Right.
And so, Kal-El Ware was the big piece that Phoenix wanted back. They're like, no, we're not trading him. You can have some, but not all of, Jaime Jaquez and, guys like that. You can have our 20th pick this year and all that. Miami doesn't have a lot of stuff that they can trade. They're not a great team. they weren't going to get that much better. And so if Houston basically wanted to gift them Kevin Durant, great, but they weren't going to be able. There wasn't an active market for KD. San Antonio didn't, and I agree with them. Durant kind of doesn't really fit the timeline. They didn't really feel like trying to accelerate things in a super competitive Western Conference and sort of short circuit the process they're on.
No, Houston is much more ready for a move.
They were
like
2
this
seed last year.
But like, as far as, we can get into this coming up next in more details, like where the Lakers go from here, like it just reinforces the idea that if they are going to look to, they're obviously in win now mode. They just got Luka Doncic in his prime, and they were trying to win now last season. They have been trying, if somewhat stuck, in their efforts to win now. And, we've talked about this a zillion times. The Russell Westbrook trade really put the Lakers very, very behind the 8 ball in terms of making steady progress.
It is the original sin for which they are still being punished.
Yeah, I mean, look, as much as Rob Pelinka, other than deal I wanted him to do, trade for Miles Turner, he unwound that deal about as well as you could realistically expect, but they were still playing catch up. And also, Rob doesn't deserve full credit for unwinding one of the most avoidable mistakes in probably the last decade in the NBA. But like, they're going to
you don't congratulate the arsonist when he becomes a fireman.
Especially if he becomes a fireman, like he applied to put out specifically a fire that he started. Like, he starts a fire, then he goes next door to the firehouse and fills out an application. Like, at that point, no, he doesn't get credit. But like, we'll get into this coming up next. Like, the Lakers are going to have to be really resourceful, really clever, and really creative, because they're working with a roster that is not bad. They were a 3 seed last year, and they managed to be a 3 seed despite all these different changes over the course of the year. Basically working with 3 different rosters and some injuries and no continuity. And, Luke at less than 100%, LeBron at less than 100%, Austin, like down the line. They're definitely not working with a terrible foundation. The real question is, how equipped are they to improve it? So we can get into that coming up next. Locked On Lakers is brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all the money go? All the time. Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, taking care of the kids, loved ones, all that stuff, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility, control over your finances. Monarch Money, it's not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, your investments, and spending all in one place, so you can stop managing your money, start building wealth instead of juggling multiple apps. You can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, plan long-term goals, managing money with your partner, or I guess in some respects managing your partner depending on the spending. It's smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, get on the same page. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year.
Okay, low-key best moment of the finals was watching Isaiah Hartenstein's little toddler baby sleep through the ceremony there. Just dead to the world. Absolutely just
didn't even have the earphones on, like the headphones on.
They didn't do the whole thing. He was just
no
out
earmuffs.
there, and then little, like half the team trying to be like, hey man, pick up that little guy's head. So that was wholesome and great to watch. It was a phenomenal finals, and the lessons that come from it are, to me, kind of fascinating, because the Haliburton injury, and if you missed it, Tyrese Haliburton, it's an Achilles injury. He was playing with a strained calf, which same thing happened to Damian Lillard. Like, it is, calf injuries can make you more susceptible to Achilles injuries. And
side note too, this is, I think, why Luka Doncic has been so cautious about coming back from his calf injuries. And I think also so aggravated reportedly by the Mavericks getting rid of so many of the training staff members that he trusted, like his people. Playing with an injury like that is no joke. And as much as, we've talked about the importance of Luka's conditioning and weight and stuff like that, just in terms of wear on your body, stress on your body, and, for your lower body, that can pay a toll as well. And these can be connected things and they matter. There's also the care. And this is why, as I know, the Mavericks as an organization, sometimes Mavericks fans would get frustrated by the recurrence of these calf strains and then Luka's absences. But we saw tonight, I mean, I get it. It's game 7 of the finals. Of course, Haliburton's going to try to play. But, this is why you don't screw around with it, man. These things can get out of hand really, really fast.
And so, to me, when you combine the Haliburton injury, because Indiana went from, and I think the game kind of played out how I sort of thought it would before Haliburton got hurt, where I figured at home Oklahoma City there would be a moment in this game when Oklahoma City would have a push that would be too hard for Indiana, even as resilient as they are, to come back. I think that might have happened that way, even with Haliburton. The difference was without Haliburton, Indiana really just couldn't withstand it. They didn't have the quite enough to overcome it. But Indiana went from game 7 of the finals. We're 1 game away from a title. At worst, we took a 68 win team, I believe the Thunder were this year.
Yes, they were.
To game 7 in the finals. This is as close as you can get to winning a title without winning it. They went from that to our chances of winning the conference again next year aren't 0, because Indiana is still a very good team, but are severely diminished because Haliburton's not going to be able to play if at all. You
and I were texting, and you and I were texting, and I was saying, honestly, from Indiana's perspective, if they weren't going to win this thing anyway, they would have been so much better off just losing in game 6. And you obviously you don't know that at the time, but this is the worst case scenario. You don't win the championship and you lose your star.
Right. And so they went from, okay, well, we have a chance to be back here, because remember, it's the second straight conference finals that Indiana made. They won it this year. Maybe they lose in the finals next year. They've obviously shown themselves to be a very good playoff team, extraordinarily well coached, with the kind of roster that just suits playoff basketball really well. Now, a lot of that goes out the window because Haliburton is hurt. The Celtics went from being a team that was set to repeat to a team that was probably going to lose in the second round, and now is looking potentially at a gap year because Jason Tatum may not be able to play for most of next year as well, with his version of the injury. And I don't worry about these guys recovering in the same way that we used to 15, 20, 25, 30 years ago with an Achilles injury. The medicine has advanced. Look at Kevin Durant. I think most people forget that he tore his Achilles. But when you combine it with the Durant trade and things like Miami making the evaluation that, you know what, we're not giving up the farm for Kevin Durant, even though it's a splashy trade, put him with Adebayo and whatever. You have to be both incredibly opportunistic, because things change in a heartbeat, and what you look like, okay, we're not quite good enough. All of a sudden a door opens and you're like, oh, maybe we have a chance here. You can go from, those opportunities can pop up at any time. But the flip side is you also have to have a really good understanding of how good you are before you make changes. And that's where the Lakers are. They're in that tricky position that you noted, kind of going into the break. They're really good. They were a 3 seed, but they've got some big, obvious flaws. So how aggressively do you try to fix them?
Well,
And all that, because you don't want to punt away a season, but you also don't want to do anything stupid.
Well, before I get to that, I mean, long or the short, it may be there's only so aggressive the Lakers may be able to get because they're dealing with so few assets to begin with. But I wanted to make sure to get to one lesson I think should be there from these playoffs. And it was funny. Over the weekend, I don't remember who. I thought I was responding to somebody as part of a Twitter comment thread, and somebody had brought up the idea of the Pacers and the Thunder going deeper into their bench. And I thought that I was responding to this person or the people. I believe our friend Daman Rangula was part of the conversation as well. And I responded, JJ cut off in agreement. JJ cut off way too many options as the playoffs progressed. Can't severely shrink a bench and deem Hayes unplayable and predetermine connect as a no-go, particularly in a series where Luka was sick, Austin's hurt, LeBron is 40, DFS's ankle, 36 hours between game 3 and game 4. It's too limiting. I accidentally sent this out as a standalone tweet, which made me look like a lunatic because this was apparently just like a thought that I was sending out at like 11:30 in the morning on a random day. But the fact that it kind of blew up, it got like about 30,000 views, like 500 likes. Apparently there were a lot of people agreeing with me. I have no idea where the original conversation went. But one of the players that makes me really think about this in this series was Tony Bradley for the Pacers. He was a very little used big man over the course of this season. He didn't join the Pacers until March on a series of 10-day contracts. And Tony Bradley has bounced around the league. He was out of the league for most of this. I think actually he was out of the league for the entirety of this season until Indiana picked him up on these 10 days. He averaged about 8 minutes a game or something. But Rick Carlisle was willing to give Tony Bradley alternate shots throughout these playoffs.
He sort of slowly took the minutes that Thomas Bryant was getting.
Right. But that is something that JJ Redick would not have done. I feel very confident saying that he would not have done something like that. And you cannot convince me that Tony Bradley, who again was not in the NBA for the majority of this season, is automatically a better option, not just than all the ones JJ turned down, but then essentially limiting yourself to like 5 guys. At some point, you have to be willing to play more of your imperfect options because doing it as extreme as JJ did is simply impractical. Like you can't do it that way.
I think
like to the extreme that he did that.
I think this is definitely a situation where multiple things can be true at once. I think it is unquestionable JJ got a little tight in that series. I don't think anybody I think JJ
and I believe in JJ big picture. I think JJ is going to be a good coach, but this is one of the.
If you looked at, I think if you ask JJ, he got too tight in that series.
And this isn't me Monday morning quarterbacking either. I said this a lot during the series.
Right. JJ said as much in after the season that he got he didn't coach that playoff series well, but I do think it is easy to look at Carlisle and easy to look at Dagno and how they use their rosters. And look, this guy played and this guy hadn't played. And Tony Bradley, you say, because, again, I'll go back to where we started. Context. We can carry this conversation in tomorrow's show. You can swap out Tony Bradley for Thomas Bryant when in a couple ways. First of all, you have to have those options. You have to have more than one center that you can turn to. The Lakers, the only other guy they had on the roster that they could play, if you don't think Jackson Hayes is playing well or that they're being successful with Hayes on the court, and very few people believe that they were, the only other guy they had they could turn to in that situation was Alex Len. And Alex Len sucked. So, there was no Tony Bradley on the Lakers roster for them to turn to. Moreover,
But I don't think if there was, he would have
I
done
don't,
it anyway.
but
I don't think
there
he would have
wasn't.
anyway.
I don't know, because the roster was limited. And
That is also
even the
true.
guys that were playing, the starters, you can plug in players who hadn't played as much. You can go deeper into your roster when you have 5 guys who are part of your core rotation who are excellent two-way players, who are versatile. You know, when you have Neesmith, when you have Nembhard, when you have all these Siakam, when you have guys who can go and fill a lot of holes and play in a lot of ways. And so I think, and we'll pick this up tomorrow, because I think it's a really interesting conversation. How do you construct a roster that where your most important players allow for you to get more out of the back end of your rotation?
Sure.
The Lakers had a very limited roster in that sense, and very mismatched. And so that's something they need to fix. And we can carry that into tomorrow. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can hang out with over 35,000 subscribers to the channel. We will see everyone tomorrow.